Oh, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on part 6 of Run with the Wind's novel, and I am loving this novel. I'm loving it so much. All of the Kakeru and Haiji interactions, I'm just like, ugh. I went back and a few days ago, I rewatched episodes 11, 12, and 13, which I was actually surprised because 11, 12, and 13 covers most of the time they're at the summer camp, which was this last chapter. And yet this last chapter, chapter 5, felt so much more expanded and spread out in comparison. But where the way that episode 13 ends, though, I don't know if this novel is going to touch on it or if it's anime only. We'll probably find out this week. But it ends with Kakeru having like the mediation circle where he kind of airs all his grievances and talks about the coach that he punched and the way that it affected Sakaki and everything. And we've not gotten to talk about Kakeru's past in the novel yet. The anime does it much earlier. So I'm going to be curious to see how the novel handles that. It may be in this chapter. It may be down the road. But I remember watching the anime and I felt so emotional about it at the time because this was back in 2021, by the way, a while back, 2020, 2021. It was in that time frame. And I was in the middle of my graduate program for communications, and I was doing certification to do mediation and conflict resolution. And one of the things we had just talked about in class had been the idea of the mediation circle, where people get together and they talk about the conflicts that they're involved in, and they all move forward from that point. And the idea that something I learned in class was instantly translated onto the screen through anime was such a feeling, and it was euphoric, and I was like, it made me feel so like inspired and empowered, and it's just one of my favorite moments in the anime. And if it doesn't happen in the novel, that's fine, but I thought the anime handled it really, really well. And there are some little Haiji and Kakeru moments in the anime from those summer episodes, but nothing like this. Nothing like this, that's for sure. This is some good stuff. So I'm really excited about it. We are on part 6 of 10, so we're past the halfway point in the book, which is really exciting. This section is called The Soul Screams, so I'm very curious to see what all we get from it. But I'm loving the novel. The novel has been a really good time, and I'm gonna get curious to see how it differentiates from the anime, because at this point I've watched up to episode 13. I didn't want to watch any further because I was afraid I'd get it. The anime does shuffle things up a little bit differently from the novel, so it focuses more on some aspects than the novel does, and it focuses less on others. So, which I really like, because if this had just been a complete carbon copy replica of the anime, I would be like, well, what's the point? But because it is a little bit different, and because it's from Kakeru's perspective, it does give that extra replay value, and it makes me want to go back and rewatch the anime, which is always a good thing. So, but yeah, we're not gonna waste any more time. Oh my gosh, I'm spilling coffee everywhere. Yeah. We'll wipe it up with my little Survey Corps coat. Wash that later. But anyway, we are going to get started on the novel. I hope you all are excited about this. It's super cold outside. We had this big cold front come through, and I was like, I just want to bundle up, get warm, and read a book. And what better one to do that with than... So thank you, Is Zero Anti-Zero, but let's get started. We're going to start Run with the Wind, part 6, The Soul Screams. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. All right. Kakeru placed a cracked rice bowl on the edge of the hallway. Drops of water tapped the back of his hand. He shifted the bowl ever so slightly until it was just right, and then stood up to survey the second-floor hallway. There were Donbury bowls and kettles and whatnot here and there and down the entire hallway. The scene looked like some kind of voodoo setup. It was Kakeru's turn to go around Chikuseso at regular intervals, with a big bucket to collect the rainwater accumulating in these vessels. The long rain of autumn, which was falling softly outside, produced a cacophony inside Chikuseso. So we're done with the summer chapters. Kakeru sighed as he emptied the bucket in the garden. The things you have to do when you're poor. Can't we do something about all this noise? Nico groaned, scratching his head in frustration. I can hear it dripping all night from my room. Plip, plop, plippity plop. It's endless. I'm sick of it. Us second floorers have gotten used to it, said Joda. Maybe you have a dull sensibility when it comes to sounds, Nico-senpai, Yuki scoffed, wiping his glasses. There's some poetry in the sound of raindrops. Sometimes they tap out a fresh rhythm and it makes me pause to listen. It's not really the sound of raindrops, just leaks in the roof, Kakeru thought. But of course, he kept his thoughts to himself. With Yuki, that's probably a good thing. Well, the prelim is fast approaching now, Kyosei began, ignoring their complaints about the deteriorating building. Everyone was gathered in a circle in the twins' room under Kyosei's orders. They had finished their practice for the day and had launched a drinking party. Their thoughts were still on the leak, but they turned to look at Kyosei anyway. Your hard work at the training camp has paid off. Every one of you is definitely growing stronger. Kakeru? Ready. Kakeru had a sheet of paper with their records from practice, and he went down the list out loud. Here's our personal best times for running 10,000 meters so far. Haiji, 29:14. Musa, 29:35. Joda, 29:55. Joji, 29:55. Yuki, 30:26. Shindo, 30:27. Nico, 30:48. King, 31:11. Prince, 35:38. Kakeru, 28:58. Kyosei, who had been listening to the recitation with his eyes closed, gave a nod when Kakeru finished. Admirable progress. Everyone, it makes me proud seeing how far you've come as runners. Yeah, honestly, at the very beginning of this, Prince was running like 31 minutes to do 5 kilometers. So the fact that he's cut that time in half is insane. Thanks to the summer camp, now I know what it's like to go to hell, said Joda. I'd be shocked if we couldn't run a bit better after that much practice, Joji added. We have a little less than 1 month until the prelim, Kyosei announced, looking around at each of them. I believe most of you can improve your 10-kilometer times even more before then. Plus, you seem to have gotten used to running 20 kilometers as well, though there is one exception. Prince shrank. He always started to flag when he passed the 15-kilometer mark. After that, his pace got steadily worse, but Kyosei didn't criticize him. All in all, we're in good shape. You've been building up stamina, strong and steady. Keep going at this rate, and we'll put up a proper fight at the prelim. Just make sure to watch out for any signs of injury. Let's all keep up the good work. As if that's not like foreshadowing. Yeah, everyone cheered. Not too hard, though, Joji added under his breath and clinked his cup with Kakeru's. Shindo took a slug of his local sake. By the way, we got a request for an interview, he said. Oh, is this how we're going to weave in the reporter? The twins lit up. No way, that's awesome. Who is it? Another newspaper? They shouted over each other. Back at Lake Shirakawa, the Chikuseiso team had been interviewed by a journalist for the newspaper, Yomiuri Shimbun. At first, a writer for a track and field magazine came to observe Tokyo Taiku's training camp. Totai had narrowly missed out on the seed rights at the previous Hakeone Ekiden, so the team had to climb up from the prelim this time. Interesting! But because it was a solid team of competent athletes, it was virtually a given that Totai would pass through the prelim to the Hakone. So the magazine was interviewing the group ahead of time. The Chikuseiso members were coming out of the convenience store by the lake when they saw the Totai athletes getting interviewed. The students were lined up in the parking lot, and the journalist was taking a group picture. After the photo shoot, the journalist held up a recorder to the captain, and he made some comments. Though the middle-aged journalist was doing the work of photographer and interviewer, and the captain was in a plain tracksuit, King was still riveted. They look like celebrities, he murmured, rooted to the spot. Kakeru stopped alongside him and stared absent-mindedly at the scene. Eventually, the Totai team dispersed. The rider thanked the captain and started walking towards the corner of the parking lot, where the Chikuseiso members were standing with plastic bags in their hands. Oh, he said, noticing the group, you must be distance runners, too. Can you tell? Joda replied, looking tickled. I can see from your build. But you're not Totai, are you? He cast a puzzled look at their disparate t-shirts. We're Kansai University's track team, King answered, slightly nervous. And we'll be running the Hakeone Ekiden, too. With his big smile and childlike boldness, Joji said this like it was a done deal. Kakeru was hiding behind Nico. He thought the journalist would laugh at Joji's remark. A team from a college that's never ever made the prelims? Were they in their right minds? But he didn't laugh. With a serious expression, the man looked at each of them. Now that's exciting. Who's the captain? Is this the whole team here? Though they'd never really declared anyone captain, everyone naturally looked at Kyosei. Somewhat reluctantly, he spoke up. I'm the captain. Haiji Kyosei. This is all of us. Haiji Kyosei. The journalist racked his brain. If you're who I think you are, I heard you suffered an injury. So you're still doing track? And you back there, aren't you Kurihara, who used to be at Sendai Josai? Without answering, Kakeru shrank back even further behind Nico. And who are you? Joji asked. The man said, oh, I'm sorry, and handed Kyosei his business card. It read Track World Monthly Magazine, editor Shingo Sanuki. Can I talk to you guys for a few minutes? Are you trying to compete in the Hakeone Ekiden with just 10 members? Sanuki fired off several questions. He turned out to be quite a skillful listener and letting out interested when he heard the name of their coach. When they told him that their rent would go up if they didn't shine at Hakone, he laughed. Well, this sure is life or death. The next morning before dawn, Sanuki appeared on the lakeside road to watch the Chikusei Show's team joggings routine. When they were all done with their laps, he approached them. You really make an intriguing team. Most of you are practically amateurs, but I can tell you have a whole lot of potential for growth. Unsure whether he was praising or insulting them, everyone stood without saying a word. But Sanuki nodded to himself with obvious enthusiasm. It's a team like yours that add more spice to the Hakone race. I'm afraid we only have space for an article on Totai this time, but there's a journalist I know at a newspaper. I'll tell him about you. A newspaper, King gulped. I don't like where this is headed, Kakeru thought. Sanuki was true to his word, and he didn't waste any time. Around the end of their training camp, a journalist from Yomiuri Shimbun came to Lake Shirakawa to call on their cabin. As one of the sponsors of the Hakone Ekiden, the newspaper often published feature articles related to the event. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was like, you all are a lot more interesting than this other team because you're an underdog story. The other team just didn't make the cut, but you all have some like finesse and pizzazz to your story. So, I heard about you from Mr. Sanuki at the monthly. My curiosity was piqued, and I decided to make use of my holiday to pay you a visit. The reporter introduced himself as Masaki Nunoda. He had a mild demeanor and seemed to be about the same age as Sanuki. Monthly, Prince mumbled. That's what they call Track World Monthly magazine? Who's going to know what it's about? Besides, it clashes with Monthly Shonen magazine. The Chikusei members assumed he was going on about manga again and ignored him. Kakeru slipped into the kitchen away from the dining room. It's not feasible to write about you on the sports pages since you haven't exactly passed the prelim yet, but I think our readers would be drawn to a story about a small track team working towards Hakone Ekiden. Unfortunately, it'll only be in the local edition in Tokyo, but I'd be delighted if you agree to an interview. Finding it difficult to refuse Nanuna's earnest proposal, Kyosei gave in. Nanuda quickly called in a reporter from the local edition and a photographer. They asked about things like the team's day-to-day life and their determination to compete at Hakone. Mainly the twins and King gave the answers. The photographer took some pictures of their practice by the lake and a group shot in front of the cabin. The article was published, accompanied by a large photo on the very same day that they returned to Chikusei after their long training camp. Shindo and Musa were thrilled, going out to buy lots of copies. The team cut out the articles and hung it up in the Chikusei's kitchen. They handed out copies to the shopping arcade denizens too. They even pinned a clipping to the notice board on campus without bothering to get permission. Of course, Shindo and Musa made sure to send a clipping to their families back home, enclosed with a letter. I've worked at a school that has to get permissions for clipboards like that, so that's kind of funny. The response was enthusiastic. The impromptu group of supporters from the shopping arcade became even more excited about the team's endeavor, and the university began to take notice. Most of the Chikusei residents received calls from their family. Both Mr. Sanuki and Mr. Nunoda are definitely going to cover us more closely from the prelim, Shindo said, pouring more sake into his cup. But this time, we got a request from somewhere else, a TV station. TV! King exclaimed. Someone from Nippon TV got in touch with me. They broadcast the Hakone Ekiden. Apparently they cover the prelim as well. They told me they're going to follow several teams competing at the prelim with a camera. The teams that are especially noteworthy. Whoa, and they chose us as one of them? King was already trembling. What a joyful occasion. Musa looked visibly moved. I haven't given them an official answer yet, Shindo said. I mean, it'll defeat the purpose if we get too distracted by the TV camera. We need to focus on the race. I wanted to ask you guys what you thought first. Why vote yes? Let's get on TV! Joda's hand shot up. Why in the world would we turn it down? Joji followed up. As for King, he already had beads of nervous sweat on his face as he checked his own appearance. I was thinking I should get a haircut soon. I'd also like to appear on TV, Musa smiled. If I record it on a videotape and send it to my family, I'm sure they'll get all excited. I think it'll be good for us too, Shindo said. It would make our parents happy, but more than that, it's great publicity. I bet we'll reach a lot more people this way. That's true, Kiyose crossed his arms. What about the rest of you? What do you think? He looked at the other members who hadn't expressed their preferences. If you guys want to do it, then I'm easy either way. With the composure of a real grown-up, Nico remained grounded at the mention of TV. Prince gave a throwaway answer. I don't mind either. I don't care about TV anyway. He was only interested in manga. Seriously? King yelped. We might even meet one of those announcer girls. You know how hot they are. I don't really know any, Prince replied, looking bored. Joji and Joda jumped in the discussion. Wait, are they too famous to come to the prelim? Well, you never know. Who's the sportscaster girl at Nippon TV? Kiyose stayed out of the announcer talk and turned to Kakeru and Yuki, who hadn't broken their silence. The answer's already clear by majority vote, but let's hear your opinion. But it's settled, isn't it? Kakeru sighed. There's no point in me saying I don't want to. Oh, why not, Kakeru? Joji asked. If we go on TV, our parents are going to be stoked. We'll get all the girls' attention. What's there to complain about? That's just how you picture it. Kakeru mumbled, a half-hearted argument. Not everyone cares about making their parents happy, you know, Yuki muttered. His voice didn't have its usual sarcastic sting. Oh, that's right, because Yuki doesn't have the best relationship with his parents in the anime, if I am remembering correctly. I think so. Everyone went quiet for a moment. The group sensed something bitter in Yuki's words. Realizing that their eyes were on him, Yuki quickly returned to his usual self. I can't imagine anyone who's as greedy as you guys when it's about stealing the show. Well, there's no use arguing now. I won't say no if that's what you all want. When Hanako heard the news that the TV camera would follow the Chikuseiso team at the prelim, she cried out, "Oh no! We have to redo the banner!" What banner? Kakeru asked. Kakeru and Kiyose were in the Chikuseiso kitchen unpacking the box of unsold vegetables that Hanako had brought over. Well, everyone from our street is so excited to go cheer for you guys. My dad and the plasterer painted a banner for the prelim. But you know how the kanji for kan and kansai is pretty dense? The plasterer was like, well, what do we do, Katsu? The letter's going to look like a blob on the banner. And my dad went, well, that's where the puns come in. In the end, they punned on the proverb, taiki bonsai. Great talents are slow to ripen, and wrote, Taki Kansai, let's go Kansai you. The huge sign in bright red paint boasted that great talents are ready to serve. That's a bit. Kakeru had no comment. Oh my God. I know, it's going to look pretty dorky. Hanako sighed. Kiyose was laughing silently again as he peeled some satamo taro. But anyway, that's great news, Hanako continued. It means you're getting recognition for all your hard work. It's a big deal. Oh my God, the idea of great talents are ready to serve. I'm like, oh no. And Haiji's just like, here. Mm-hmm. While they would attract more attention, that attention was bound to bring them more trouble as well. Without answering, Kakeru flattened the empty cardboard box. Then the twins came in and the kitchen sprang to life. Oh, I didn't know you were here, Hana. Did you hear about the TV thing? I heard. We'll all be down there to cheer you on, and I'll tape the show too. Hanako sat down at the table and started to happily chatter away with the twins. Aren't you going to do something? Kiyose whispered to Kakeru, slicing the tofu balanced on his palm. Kakeru was mixing miso paste into the pot, and bewildered, he asked, What do you mean? Oh, nothing. Kiyose said, Hanako, why don't you stay for dinner? The other residents piled into the kitchen and sat around the table with Hanako. Those who didn't fit brought out the low table and sat on the floor. The menu was stewed satoimo and cold pork shabu-shabu. It's almost time of the year where you start craving sukiyaki instead of the cold shabu, Joda said. With beef, Joji chirped. Both boys heaped up a pile of boiled pork in their bowls with wolfish appetites. The vegetables from Hanako added a splash of color to the meal, including the grated daikon, one white, one vermilion, with the ground chili mixed in. Oh, I almost forgot. Hanako put down her chopsticks and rummaged in her bag by the table. It's not just veggies I brought today. She presented a big stack of photo albums. The twins took them and flipped open the paper covers. Oh, pictures from summer camp, and there's one for each of us. Each album had a name written on the cover. Kakeru also stopped eating and peered at the album bearing his name in Hanako's handwriting. There were group shots as well as highlights featuring each of them, all neatly arranged in chronological order. I was making copies and thinking about the layout, so it took a while to get it all ready, she said apologetically. The effort she'd put into making them was obvious. Everyone was moved and eager to thank her. Oh, I like Hanako, getting involved with the group. That's really nice. For a while, They were engrossed in the albums, swapping them around to see the others. The photos brought back vivid memories of summer. Now that I look back on it, we did have a lot of fun. Oh, you even got a shot of the toe tie coach. There's a sneak shot, laughed Hanako. The photo depicted a man with slick back hair, his feet planted wide apart on the ground holding a bamboo shinai sword. That dude was super scary. He was a really tough drill sergeant, a fiend, but in a different kind of way from Haiji. On the last day of camp, the Totai team had showed up at the hiking course. Things hadn't turned ugly. The Chikusei team was in the middle of a cool down, having already wrapped up a cross-country run, and the Totai students had other things to worry about. The upperclassmen never paid attention to the Kansai team anyway, and the first years were focusing on practicing like small dogs cowering in fear. Their hellish coach was keeping a close watch on them, a fierce glint in his eyes. It was like a military drill, Musa remembered. I remember those maxims the guy was screaming. What were they again? He was saying stuff like, count yourselves lucky for running in this heat, and running is a battle for survival. They all burst out laughing. Imagine having a coach like that. I would have quit a long time ago. Prince frowned. Are all track teams like that at other universities? Musa asked. The coach at my junior high was, Nico said. You gotta watch out for the ones with slicked back hair. Based on what stats? Yuki commented frostily. I think most university teams emphasize their athletes' independence and voluntary practice, Kiyose explained, looking up from his album. But schools like Totai do exist. That's what I don't like about sports clubs, Prince shook his head. They're shackled in hierarchies. Everyone has to obey the coach. No questions asked like slaves. Some people think that they have to keep the students on a tight leash or there'd be no order and they'd slack off, Shindo said. Same with high school. The strong teams always had tough discipline. It's a tricky question, isn't it? King said, snatching the last slice of pork. If they're not strict, they can't win the game. But if it's no fun, people wouldn't want to play sports. What do you do then? That's ridiculous. Kakeru spat out in a low tone. The kind of people who need strict rules or fun to run should quit running. There you go again with the hyperbole, Joji chided. What do you think, Haiji? Joda asked. If I thought being strict was better, I'd be tightening up your leashes, right? Kiyose replied. Hanako, who'd been listening to the exchange in silence, let out a small laugh. Found an embarrassing photo of Haiji, Yuki announced, holding up the last page of the album. It was from their last night at the camp when they all went to the lake for some fireworks. Kiyose was crouching down to light the Senko sparkler, when Nira had panicked at the noise and scrambled right under Kiyose's face. Kiyose toppled over onto his back from the impact and tried to peel the dog off to no avail. The whole sequence was captured in great detail in 3 photos. Kiyose blushed. Why are those in Yuki's album? I put it in everyone's because I thought it was funny, Hanako said nonchalantly. The twins both held up their page to show Kiyose and beamed. Starting tomorrow, we start training military style, Kiyose said. When it was time for Hanako to go back to Yaokatsu, everyone saw her off to the front door. It's getting late. Someone should accompany you home, Musa suggested. Shindo nodded and looked at the twins. The twins didn't notice, and they were nodding along in agreement. Someone had to give them a push. Twins, go on, said Nico. Joda and Joji looked a little surprised. Oh, sure, we can go. Okay, let's go, Hana. They set off with Hanako walking in the middle. Hopeless. How can they be so clueless? The others grumbled to one another as they headed back to their rooms. Kakeru was the last one to turn back from the door. Kiyose glanced back at him. Well, aren't you going to do something? Again, what are you talking about? Oh, nothing. Kiyose almost laughed, but it faded from his face. Do you think I'm too soft, Kakeru? Kakeru didn't understand what Kiyose meant by the question. Kakeru paused as he was taking off his shoes and looked up at Kiyose. His face was obscured in shadow, the light of the hallway behind him. You see it, don't you? We're actually on the borderline. There's no guarantee we'll be able to get through the prelim. Should I have pushed them to run more? Even if it meant binding them to strict rules? I know you don't believe any of that. Kakeru cut him off. He stepped on the ledge of the hallway, leaned against the wall, and looked at Kiyose's profile right in front of him. You don't like playing drill sergeant, and you think no amount of force would make people run. Am I wrong, Haiji? No, you're right. Kiyose looked down for a moment, and then up at Kakeru and smiled. Sorry, I got a bit unsure of myself there. There's still time. I'm sure everyone will get faster by the time we run at the prelim. We'll make it through. I love this like turning of Kakeru supporting Haiji and getting him to be more chipper about it all. Also, I don't know if I don't know why Haiji keeps on suggesting that Kakeru likes Hanako and keeps like pushing him towards her. He clearly doesn't like her, but okay. As he tried to lift Kyose's spirits, Kakeru wondered what made him worry. It's not like him. Kyosei was already striding forward towards his goal, full of conviction, aloof from the rest of the world. It was the first time that he betrayed any hint of doubt. Kakeru guessed that the conversation over dinner had brought the question of Kyosei's mind, but he couldn't see what would be weighing on him that they hadn't already come to so far. Kakeru felt he hadn't said enough and desperately searched for the words to express what was inside of him. What? He got stuck after the first syllable. He wasn't used to putting things into words. Kyosei looked at him while he tried to gather his thoughts into something coherent. There was a distant look in Kyosei's eyes, as if he was seeing his past self through Kakeru. I'm sick of being tied up. Kakeru tried again. I couldn't breathe. It was killing me. I just want to run. That's all. Not for any purpose, just to run free by his own will. Only to follow the voice that called to him from the depths of his body and soul, urging him to run. Sakaki looked like he's content with the strict discipline at Totai, but I'm not like him. If you'd acted like that drill sergeant, Haiji, I wouldn't be here right now. I would have left Aotake on the first day of practice. Kyosei's eyes snapped back into focus on Kakeru. He lightly put a hand on Kakeru's shoulders and slipped past him. Night, Kakeru. In the split second before Kyosei closed the door behind him, Kakeru could see that his back showed no trace of weakness or uncertainty anymore, just as always. Good night, Kakeru murmured, and returned to his own room. Just confess to one another. Just confess to one another. Get it over with. Oh my God. In preparation for the prelim, it was imperative for the Chikyuseiso team members to let their bodies rest by degrees to fully recover from the strains of the summer. They still followed a training regimen that was solid through the autumn days, but unlike their summer camp routine, they didn't spend all their time running. Still, even Kakeru was beginning to feel a dip in his physical and mental strength. The fatigue set in with the pressure of the looming race. They'd worked so hard, but what if things went wrong on race day and it all amounted to nothing? We always talk about this with the speech team, that October is like the worst month for studying and academics. And it's like, I know that the school system is different in Japan, but October is such a stressful month because in America, it's like halfway through the semester and you're like, you can't see the end of the tunnel and you start to get worried about like, am I doing okay? Am I doing right? And the newness and fun of summer has wore off. So this feels like it's just like, it's that same creeping anxiety is seeping in the same direction, which is interesting. Should just a wee bit. There we go. All right. They'd worked hard, but what if things went wrong on race day and it all amounted to nothing? Unlike the previous track meets, the prelim was a one-shot bet. No do-overs. They wouldn't get another chance to try again if they didn't achieve the results they needed. This knowledge made Kakeru tense. It weighed down on his mind and body. The training routine became denser. It was a matter of course for them to run 20 kilometers of cross-country, and on the track they started practicing build-ups, which meant they ran 7 kilometers in total, and then they run the first kilometer at a pace faster than 3 minutes, 10 seconds, and then steadily increased their speed until they reached a pace of 2 minutes and 50 seconds for the end. Because they had to accelerate more and more over a long distance, it was extremely demanding as a run. The breathlessness that came in the middle of an endurance run, as well as the wild pulse after a full-speed sprint, assailed them all at once. It was like having to play water polo while drowning. Prince threw up multiple times from the exertion. Kyosei warned him every time to hold it back as much as possible. You'll get in the habit of vomiting. Keep it in and keep running. I would if I could, Prince ducked his head down in the weeds growing by the track. The twins went over to soothe him but ended up retching alongside him. I feel like I'm choking on vomit, croaked Joda. It was a disaster. Yet as they repeated the routine with reasonable breaks in between, they gradually adapted. Soon they could keep up with both 20-kilometer cross-country and the build-up training. They also went to the Showa Kinen Park in Tachikawa, the venue of the prelim, to do a trial run on the actual course. One day, only 2 weeks before the prelim, Kiyose assembled everyone on a cross-country run. A chilly wind blew across the darkening field. The blades of grass had lost their vigor, leaving no vestige of summer. With no one to pick them, the fruits on the persimmon tree swayed in the breeze, the same color as the sunset. It's all about focus from here on out, Kiyose said. Sharpen your focus and control yourself. On race day, you should be in peak condition. Easier said than done, Nico sighed. These days, he was struggling to curb his appetite. His nerves made him want to eat more than usual. I feel like my poor little heart is going to hit its peak already. King had been suffering from constant spasms in the stomach, even during practice. Hope I last till the race. You have nothing to fear, Kiyose assured them, in a calm, gentle voice. You've all done more than enough practice. All that's left for you to do is use the pressure of the race as a whetstone to hone yourself. Picture yourself as a gleaming sword cutting through the race. Refine your blade to a thin, keen edge. That's a poetic way to put it, Yuki said. But effective, Prince said. If you sharpen it too much before the prelim, you'll snap in half. But if it's dull and unpolished on the day of the race, you won't get anywhere. That's what you mean, isn't it? Exactly, Kiyose nodded. And how to find the right balance is one thing you can't pick up by just blindly throwing yourself into practice. It's a battle against your inner self. I want each of you to listen closely to your own body and mind and sharpen yourself carefully. That's it, Kakeru thought. Maybe this is a part of the strength you need in distance running. In a long-distance race, you didn't need an explosive burst of muscle power, nor was the race about performing some special technique with intense concentration. Running a long-distance race merely involved putting one foot in front of the other and steadily making your way forward. All you had to do is keep moving your legs forward for a certain distance, a simple act that most people have experienced at some point in their lives. As for the stamina needed for perseverance, that had already been acquired through daily practice. But Kakeru had seen so many athletes around him who slipped out of shape either right before or during a race. They would start off at a steady clip, but out of nowhere, something would knock them off their stride. Or they might be in perfect physical condition, but suddenly start losing their speed at practice 3 days before a race. He'd seen people who had caught a cold at the last minute, despite being extremely careful, and were crossed off the list of runners on the day of the race. Those athletes had done everything there was to prepare at practice. All they had to do was show up and run. Yet they still sabotaged themselves, and Kakeru had never been able to figure out why. He himself had come down with diarrhea just before the last big inter-school championship he participated in high school. It wasn't like he'd caught a chill or eaten anything spoiled. It was just that, for some inexplicable reason, his stomach suddenly got upset. Everything turned out fine. He still managed to run, but he could never shake off that question, why now? Now, he could understand why. Most of the trip-ups, known as fine-tuning failures, boiled down to pressure. Regardless of how much you practiced, there was always that anxiety that rose abruptly to the surface to make you ask, have I done enough? And as soon as you managed to convince yourself that you had, another fear consumed you. But what if I mess up? The more you wet the body and mind, the more fragile they become. The more vulnerable to catching a cold or upsetting your stomach, just as a high-precision machine breaks down easily from some specks of dust. To conquer your own doubts and fears, to hone yourself into a blade so keen and smooth that you can withstand any amount of dust, that must be one element of what Kiyose meant by strength. Though Kakeru understood this in theory, putting it into practice was another matter. The more serious he became about running, the more he was challenged by the pre-race nerves. It was a rather lonely process, coming face to face with his own mind and body, a constant solitary battle between compromise and excess. In the end, Kakeru stopped brooding over it. The more he mulled things over, the more fear was generated inside of him. He couldn't help imagining the worst-case scenarios. People got scared of ghosts because they thought about them, imagining what they might be like. Kakeru disliked things that were nebulous. He didn't want to worry about what evaded him, those things that might just exist if you think they do. He wanted black and white answers. Something was either there or it wasn't. Just putting one foot in front of the other would always make you move forward. Kakeru emptied his head and ran. He simply sank his teeth into practice, going through the motions of running over and over again, the movements that had already become part of his muscle memory. He didn't know any other way to overcome the pressure. The other Chukyusei members didn't have as much experience as Kakeru, so they didn't have a proven method for relieving their nerves. Some of them, like Kakeru, trained even harder. Some burned incense when they slept. One reread every volume of a passionate sports manga that he owned. Each in his own way, everyone was doing his best to make final preparations for the prelim. 2 days before the race, Kakeru could sense his level of concentration rising steadily. The team's practice was lighter than usual that day, and they wouldn't get too tired before the big day. Of course, they still went on their usual individual jogs in the morning and evening, but there was no group practice scheduled for the 2 days before the race. They had done everything that was needed to be done. All that remained was to loosen up their bodies while keeping an eye on their own conditions, firing up their drive and concentration even higher. At Joji's suggestion, there's only one thing left to get us all ready. The Jikuseiso team decided to drink together in the twins' room 2 days before the prelim. For them, it was the quickest way to ease their tension and strengthen their bond as a team. Since the landlord was the coach, at least officially, they invited him too. The old man had handed Kiyosei some money for repairing the hole in the floor, but Kiyosei had passed it to Shindo to add to the funds for the team. What with the cost for transport and accommodation, they needed all the money that they could get. They timed the landlord's arrival carefully. Just as he passed over the threshold of the building, Joda sailed past him with a nose in a magazine opened at the pinup spread. The landlord, distracted by the photo of a woman in a bikini, slipped off his shoes without glancing up at the ceiling and followed right behind Joda to the stairs. Oh my God. Their plan was a success. Kakeru and Joji, who had been keeping watch, gave each other a small high five. They had appointed Prince to sit on the hole. Even though he wanted to go to the toilet, or if an earthquake struck, Kiyosei and Shindo had strictly forbidden him to move from the spot as long as the landlord was present in the room. Prince was now obediently hiding the hole while reading manga. Drinks were flowing. When they were all feeling mellow, Kiyosei called out, "Now then, coach, how about a word?" The landlord, who'd been hugging a large 2-liter bottle, staggered to his feet. Perhaps they were finally going to see the landlord act like a proper coach. Kakeru waited expectantly. "So, the preliminary race is just around the corner at long last. I'll tell you the secret to winning the race," he declared solemnly in a hoarse voice. "Put one foot in front of the other." Silence descended on the room. The landlord must have sensed the crashing wave of dismay and disappointment that washed over the group. He hastened to add, "Do that, and you'll get to the finish line eventually. That's all there is to it." "That's it?" King flung down his cup. "Is he out of his mind?" Yuki muttered. Well, can't we invite a more decent coach?" Nico grumbled. Murmurs of discontent spread throughout the group. Kakeru tried to steer the talk away from the landlord. "Well, Haiji, you were so sure from the beginning that with this team we'd make it to Hakone. I used to think it was pretty much impossible, but what made you so convinced in the first place?" Kiyosei looked up from his cup and smiled. "Because everyone can hold their drink." "Huh?" The complaints about the landlord ceased in an instant. Everyone stared at Kiyosei. "A lot of distance runners can handle buckets of alcohol. I guess the metabolism in their liver works well. It's the same for you guys. You don't drink like fish, more like whale sharks. I've been watching the way you drink for a long time, and that's how I knew that you could do it." "There's plenty of people out there who can drink a lot." Shindo looked up at the ceiling as if to say, "I can't believe this. That was your rationale for bringing us together?" Yuki's voice cracked in anger. Kakeru groaned. He'd hoped Kiyosei would restore everyone's morale, but it was backfiring. "Did we really come this far just because you saw how much we could drink?" The shock nearly made Prince rise to his feet, but he quickly settled back down when Shindo warned him with a look. "That's like building a skyscraper on mud purely out of willpower." "Of course that's not the only thing," Kiyosei said, slurring his words. "I just discovered the gleam of your hidden talent." "You're drunk, Haiji," sighed Kakeru. Is there anything to give us a lift?" King slumped back on the tatami. "Speaking of which, what's happening with Hanako?" Musa asked. "Hana? We get along well. Did anything happen?" The twins answered innocently. The others whispered to each other, "These two still don't get it." "What about you guys, huh? Don't you have any girlfriends?" Nico, who'd been nibbling on a strip of dried squid for a while, asked in passing. "If you do, you'd better invite them to come root for you at the race tomorrow." It was rare for anyone to mention a subject like that at Chikusei-so. So they lived in such close quarters that, they were careful to stay out of each other's private lives. That was part of it. But it was also because if someone did get a new girlfriend, he didn't have to spell it out. Everyone else would find out about it sooner or later. For the past 6 months, they'd all been so busy with practice, they had no idea or clue about each other's personal affairs. Of course, even before that, no one brought back a girlfriend to his room because everything they said and did would be audible for everyone else. The twins sang out, "We're still looking." Then how could you miss the candidate that's right in front of you? Kakeru wanted to retort. King clammed up and hunched his shoulders. What about you, since you wanted to know? Yuki asked Nico. I don't have any energy left for stuff like that right now. Nico scratched his stubbled chin. Me neither, Shindo looked down. I'm too busy running around negotiating with the supporters of the university. She might get tired of waiting soon. You have a girlfriend? Kakeru was surprised. He couldn't really put the two together in his head, the steadfast and decidingly unflashy Shindo and the flowery flamboyance of romance. Shindo has been seeing someone ever since he started at the university, Musa explained. I haven't had any luck, though. It's not easy to find someone who's willing to come back with me to my home country. Not that you have to take it for that far from the start, Kakeru said. Oh, so yeah, they did have Shindo. Now, in the anime, I just got to the episode where Shindo's girlfriend breaks up with him because he's spending too much time running, but at least they acknowledge it in the novel. What about you, Kakeru? Musa asked. Kakeru shook his head. Girls aren't interested in me. You look like you'd be popular, though, Musa observed. What about you, Prince? I like the Kakeru's like, girls aren't interested in me. I'm not interested in girls. What about you, Prince? Kakeru hastily passed the question on to someone else on the spot. But Prince was still absorbed in his manga. I'm only interested in 2D girls. Prince, born with the features of a pop idol, was basically sitting on a gold mine. I love in the novel how Prince is really good looking, but he's just like, nope, not interested in the real thing. He glanced at Kyosei. Though, I've heard some rumors about Haiji going around in our faculty once in a while. He may not look like it, but he's actually pretty... Ow! Prince yelped and held his tongue. Kyosei had flicked a peanut at him, hitting him right in the middle of the brows. No one dared to probe into the details. A thin smile played on Kyosei's face. And you, Yuki? So what did he just say there? He said, I've heard some rumors about Haiji going around in our faculty once in a while. Oh. So are they saying that he's a playboy or... What are they saying there? Me, the guy with a bright future, a nice personality, and fairly good looks? Of course I have a girlfriend. Yuki answered. Casually, King shrank even more. Why don't you ask me? The landlord piped up, filling his rice bowl with shochu. Just then a ringtone went off. It was Yuki's cell phone. Excuse me, he said, leaving the room. Hey, is that his girl again? Nico said. Kakeru also noticed that Yuki was getting many calls lately. But then, don't you think he seems somewhat down these days? Musa tilted his head, looking concerned. Meanwhile, King had apparently decided to drown his woes in drink. We're out of ice, he said, shaking an empty donburi. Kakeru was sitting closest to the door, so he stood up. I'll go get some. And this is when he's going to see Yuki, right, from the anime. When he went downstairs, he saw the front door was wide open. Yuki was outside talking on the phone. Kakeru could hear faint snatches of his voice. He seemed to be having an argument. Kakeru wondered what it could be about, but he tread softly into the kitchen so as not to disturb him. Kakeru emptied the ice cubes into the bowl and refilled the tray with water. Judging by how fast everyone was drinking, they might run out of ice again before long. He turned the temperature dial of the freezer to high and left the kitchen with the bowl. The front door was still open, but he didn't hear Yuki's voice anymore. Kakeru hesitated for a moment, then he slipped on a pair of sandals and popped his head out of the door. Yuki was squatting at the side of the entrance, gazing up at the night sky. I got ice, Kakeru called to him gently. Let's drink some more. Sure, Yuki replied, but he didn't budge. He stared vacantly, gripping his phone. Was it bad news? Kakeru crossed the threshold and crouched down beside Yuki, wrapping the bowl in his arms. No, Yuki said. My parents saw the article in the paper. They keep badgering me to come home once in a while. Where's your hometown? Tokyo. In that case, it should have been a quick trip to go see them, and there was surely no need for him to live in the rickety dorm like Chikuse-so. Kakeru remembered how Yuki had said that he didn't even go back home for New Year's. He guessed there were some personal reasons behind this. The air vibrated with the incessant chirping of insects hidden in the grass of the garden. Why aren't you so big on the TV interview? Yuki asked. Kakeru had to think for a moment. I have a lot of enemies. My parents and my teammates from high school, they probably don't even want to see my face. I'd rather not do anything to attract attention if I could help it. It sounds like you've gone through a lot. I thought you were just a track maniac. Yuki was scathing, but he didn't ask any more questions. That's the problem. I've been such a track maniac that now I have to sneak around dodging interviews. Kakeru laughed. They heard a commotion break out from the twins' room. People were shouting and scrambling about. Kakeru and Yuki looked up and rose to their feet. Well, wonder what's going on. The second floor window opened. They heard Kyosei call out, Yuki, are you there? I'm here. What happened? Call the ambulance. Kyosei saw Kakeru and Yuki standing below and waved his arms to hurry them. The landlord is coughing up blood. Kyosei flung on a zip-up hoodie and accompanied the landlord to the hospital. Everyone was accustomed to the early-to-bed, early-to-rise routine now, so they struggled to stay awake, but they all waited up for Kyosei, worried about the landlord's condition. When Kyosei finally returned to Chikuseso sometime after midnight, he was surrounded by everyone just outside the front door. His face oozed fatigue as he gravely shared the news with the group. He has a stomach ulcer, hospitalized for a week. They told me it was caused by stress from excessive tension. Stress? Joji's voice flipped. Stress over what? Our laid-back coach who doesn't look bothered about anything is stressed? Joda cocked his head, too. Got to be from too much drinking, Kakeru thought. I have serious questions about the cause, too, but I suppose the landlord has been concerned about us in his own way. Kyosei rubbed his temples. Anyhow, that's the way it is. So the day after tomorrow, actually it's already tomorrow, we'll head to the prelim without our coach. Well, we really don't mind. It wouldn't make much of a difference either way, the twins added, and Kakeru nodded. Didn't you say we could count on him when push comes to shove? Kakeru whispered to Kyosei. I said probably. Kyosei shrugged off his hoodie wearily, as if to say, oh well, what can I say? Oh! Well! So the prelim, huh? Oh my gosh. Okay. Whew. I really like that. One of the things I really like about this chapter is the concept of Kakeru getting to be closer with each of the members of... He gets close to the members in his own way. Like during the summer camp, he gets closer to the twins. He's been closer to Prince early on in the novel. He's had a few moments with Nico and with Shindo. And here he has this moment with Yuki where him and Yuki kind of bond together over the fact that they don't have a really good home life. I'm honestly surprised at this point that we don't really have much with Kakeru's past. He kind of tells Yuki here, he's like, I was this track maniac and I drove away my family and friends from being so obsessed. But that's really all he talks about. So I don't know. Again, we're only on page 182 and this novel is like 400 pages. So we're literally like halfway through almost. Now we're like just at the halfway point with chapter 7, which tells me that the actual big race is going to be a lot. But I don't know if the segments in the anime of Kakeru's violence are anime only or if they're going to pop up later on. I really thought in this chapter that the news reporter, when he came to do the interview, I got the impression that the reporter was going to notice Kakeru and bring up everything that ends up getting talked about in the anime, and he was going to bring it up here for them to talk about, but that's not what ends up happening. So I guess we'll have to see if it gets brought up in later on or not. But I also love the little subtleties of Kakeru slowly breaking down his walls around Yuki, like being able to tell Yuki like about himself, which is something Kakeru's kept really close to the vest. When Kakeru's like, girls aren't interested in me, I was like, I want to know what Prince was trying to get at about Haiji, saying there's some rumors going around about him in our faculty once in a while. That he may not look it, but he's pretty something. And then Kyosei makes him stop. So you all will probably have to comment down below what you think that means. Like, what does that mean about him? And I don't know. Haiji keeps on like kind of ribbing Kakeru. I almost feel like, is he trying to does he think that Kakeru is interested in Hana? And so he's trying to be like, well, go on, go get the girl, but doesn't realize that Kakeru is just wondering why in the world Hana's not picking up the twins are into her, or the twins are not picking up that she's into them, or vice versa. So I keep wondering about that. I know this was originally a BL. It has all of the elements. Every time Haiji and Kiyose are alone together and whispering to each other and in close proximity, I'm like, everyone in that damn house probably thinks that you're all dating. So at least Prince probably does. So, but yeah, the one thing the novel also does as well that I really appreciate is they kind of hammer home the idea of how hard they worked. Because even in the anime, it does feel as if it feels like they're still kind of a hodgepodge team, and they are an underdog team here, but the anime, even though they work really hard, it kind of makes you wonder, like, how do they do it? How'd they make the prelims? Here, by how they describe their practicing and everything, and like them running till they vomit and everything like that, like it does build up it a little bit more realistically. Like, yeah, this is how they get to where they're at. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I do appreciate that about it a lot. So, This episode was very streamlined and straightforward, and it felt like a setup chapter for everything that's going to come next. So I'm excited to see that. And I'll probably watch the anime leading up to the prelim and see where we get to with that. So awesome. But I'm curious to know your thoughts below about this chapter set and what you all thought about it. But next week's going to be the prelim, so I'm going to be curious how it's different than the anime. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back really soon with more Run with the Wind. Bye!